morning. Happy Saturday. We do hope that you're having an amazing morning so far. Join us. If you're in the bed, that's fine. If you're making breakfast, that's fine. If you are in the car getting ready to go somewhere, that's fine too. We thank you for joining us. I am Dr. Quinyon Nancy Scott, and I have the pleasure of being with
Christina Cook, Washington Post Teacher of the Year.
Yes, Christina Cook, Washington Post Teacher of the Year. Yes, sir. We're going to have an amazing morning. Do us a favor and share, tell your friends about the good work that we are doing this morning. I do have a disclaimer that everything we say on the show, nothing represents the organizations that we work for or the institutions that we attended. We are representing our own selves. And today we are going to share our values. Now, we always have a good, juicy topic for you. Before we begin, I just want to say, DMX passed away yesterday. It was indeed a tragedy for our community. And Cook, I wasn't planning on saying anything, but can I just tell you something that bothered me this week? That so many people were posting about the passing of DMX before he actually passed.
Yeah, nosy people, honey.
And I kept saying to myself, so one of my good friends posted the DMX pass. And so I texted him like, boo, you got to take this down. He said, well, he's brain dead. I was thinking to myself, well, you realize that that's not the same thing. Like,
absolutely.
Brain dead and passing are two different things. And then here it was like a whole 24 hours later that he actually ended up passing. And I'm thinking about like my family. And I was thinking about, we had a situation where my aunt was ill, and my cousin, her son, posted it on Facebook like, hey, pray for my mom. She's really, really ill. And so many of our family members found out through social media. I'm talking about myself. I shouldn't say so many of my family. I found out through social media. And I believed that because of my relationships, like we're on a family group text, right? So I believe because of my relationship with my cousins, I should not have found out through a family group text. I should have found out through him, like just putting it in the group chat, like, hey, such and such is, ill, like pray for her. And I think that we have to be mindful about the impact of, some people are old school. Some people just want to call all the family members. And then I'm thinking about, of course, he has a plethora of children and a plethora of people that love him, family, friends, entertainment, Rough Riders. The list goes on and on.
The Greeks, because all of us strolled to one of his songs in college, okay?
Let me tell you. I'm going to make you lose my mind. That's not even the name of the song, right? What's the name of the song?
I don't know. Up in here.
Yeah. When I tell you that was my anthem, like that was clearly my anthem at one point of my life. And so I don't know. So shout out to those in our community that are mourning his loss, because he definitely was very instrumental in our community. His music will forever be legendary.
It's a staple for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's a staple. Before we move on, like when you think about legacy, like what's your legacy?
Sorry, Scott, for the pause. I'm, monitoring the Facebook chat. So good morning to everybody. And I'll answer your question. Shout out to Marsh. Thank you so much for the support. Good to see you on here this morning.
Good morning.
And I also wanted to, before we talk, I also wanted to have something foolish to say before we get serious today, because we do have a serious topic to talk about. I just want you all to admire that Dr. Scott and I are serving these drop earrings in all black for you all on this day, okay? We don't often, sometimes we talk about what we're gonna wear and we try to coordinate, but many Saturdays, we have not spoken about our attire and we look and we're coordinated. And This is what being on one accord will do for you. When you're in right fellowship and communion with folks, you'll wear the same thing and not even realize it because you're vibrating on that high frequency. So that's just a quick tip for you all this morning. We want to make sure that y'all continue to vibrate as high as you can with self-care and mindfulness. But to your point, Dr. Scott, your question was, what is my legacy? Had you asked me that like 5 years ago or maybe 10 years ago, I would have said my legacy is to leave money and to leave wealth. But if you ask me that today, my legacy is to leave traditions with my kids, this value system that would allow them to attract and to get the wealth and the things they need to change the world. So for me, it's super important for my kids, and they know this about me. They must give back and impact somebody else's life in a huge way. Like if they don't do anything else for me, they have to do that. Right? The saying is, to whom much is given, much is expected and required. And they've been given a pretty decent life, more than decent. And I expect them to sow back and to pour back and to pull as many people along the way with them as they're continuing to be blessed in their future endeavors in life. So that's what I'd say my legacy is.
That's wonderful. So I do want to get off this DMX thing, but I will say that yesterday I was entrenched in all of the television stations, specifically BET, that was honoring him. And they did like a 2-hour program. And one of the things that came out was the millions of dollars that DMX would give to the community, churches, schools, community centers, and how he would just give all of his money to these organizations. Another thing that came out about him was that, of course, he grew up in the projects. We've heard that before. But he would take basically all of his friends that he grew up with, and they would tour with him.
Yeah.
And, that sounds like he just has a huge entourage, initially, what I've always thought. But the heart of the reason why he took so many with him was because he believed that if he did not expose them to the things he was being exposed to, they would never get out of the environment in which they live.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about, I 100% believe in exposure, and exposure is truly the key for others to see success. And I was thinking about, like, I wonder how many people that was in his circle truly flourished because they were able to see other parts of the world through his means.
Yeah. And you know what, it's making me think in this moment, and I'm just prayerful that his estate was taken care of. The money part, right? And that's a part of us as a community where we don't take care of our wills and executors and how we want our money to go, because I'm thinking of the organizations that do depend on that funding that he consistently gives that may not get it if things were not in order. So my prayer, and this is for everybody listening, please get your houses in order and take care of that, because you know who you want to take care of your kids. You know who you would want to have certain things, and you also know who you wouldn't want to get access to that. And so I just pray that, his family, his children, significant others, everybody is well taken care of in his absence, right? The royalties from his music. I mean, there's so many things, right? I'm sure everybody's gonna be watching Belly this weekend, and just downloading music. And I just want that DMX family to benefit from that and not others.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a great opportunity. We, of course, we don't talk about financial advisory. And then, you definitely have a side business where if people are interested in these avenues, you can also, my husband does the same thing. I'm thinking about my husband sells he sells insurance. Well, he doesn't sell insurance, but he provides you the financial guidance for insurance.
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking about the number of people that don't have insurance.
No. Yeah.
And, it's definitely not free to bury you.
No,
so in our community, we randomly see like GoFundMe pages when even, when people pass away. But I'm also noticing that, you may get shot, you may have an illness and you don't actually die, and you actually need that short-term and or long-term care.
Absolutely.
And we often also don't get that, or we get it with our job. If you work in DC, we know that it's a right to work state. So, pretty much you can get a contract. Once the contract is over, they don't have to renew your contract. And so being very mindful when you have insurances connected to your employment versus having outside insurances. So, this is just my plug to you that if your affairs are not in order, then it's a great time to get your affairs in order. And then I'll just be full transparent. Our affairs at one point was in order, but we've purchased new property.
Absolutely.
And so of course, now that we have more, we have to do more
absolutely
for insurance purposes. And so I'll just say, get your affairs in order, know where things are. But our topic for today is, so this week was AP week. And so a shout out to all of our phenomenal APs. I just want to say that when I think about like the best APs, what's a good AP, Cook? When you think about like, hey, it's AP week, I'm going to celebrate this AP. What makes a good AP for you?
A good AP is a leader who is extremely supportive. That AP is fun. That AP is knowledgeable. That AP does lunch duty. But a good assistant principal is really a principal's right-hand man or woman. That person is able to pick up where that principal left off and be that leader in that principal's absence. So happy AP week to all of us out here in the building. And
I'm just thinking, I've had amazing APs, especially, so I did 10 years of the principalship, my first 6 years. When I was at ACE, my APs were amazing. Started off with Gerard Allen, then I got Karima Carrington. Now, mind you, there were so many other people that function as an AP, although that wasn't necessarily their title. And you talk about could leave the building. Cook, I went to Paris. Like, we talk about amazing people that loved the work. And so a shout out to the APs. But the topic for the day, and this came off of one of our group chats, is that I heard an administrator say the other day that teachers are 100% responsible for the education of students. And so what are your thoughts? So the chat blew up. You had 50% of people saying that the administrator is crazy. Teachers are not responsible for 100% of the chat. And then you had administrators coming on saying that while that student is in the building, that teachers are 100% responsible for the student. And so, of course, there's different ways you can look at it. I thought about, are teachers solely responsible for students? And I thought about last week about how the student left the building. And so I truly believe that the responsibility while the student is in the care of the school, it's not on the teacher, but it's on the school. So if you're a part of the school community, then whether you're a teacher, whether you are an administrator, whether you are an assistant, everybody has to take responsibility and 100% in educating that student. And then, and I'm saying while they're in the building. What's your thoughts?
So it's loaded. Because let me tell you why it's loaded. You and I did a show. I mean, it's so cool to say all these shows we've done, but we've talked about how schools take on jobs that aren't necessarily our responsibility. So then we set up this unrealistic expectation about who's really responsible. And so as a school, in theory and in practice, we believe we do everything for kids. That's what we like to think. We say we're the lawyer, we're their doctor, we're their nurse, their friend, we're all these things. But I think when we think about, it's twofold. When we think about educating an individual, that process or that responsibility lies on the person teaching and then also the person receiving. So when I think about a teacher's responsibility in a school, it is my job to put up rules and expectations to keep you safe so that you can interact in the environment but it's not just on the school. So today I'm probably saying something opposite what I would normally say and think, because I always put the blame and onus on the school, but teachers and administrators could only do but so much, because you're dealing with human beings, right? And so one of the things we've learned about like setting classroom rules and guidelines is you pretty much make rules that you can live by, because you can't control other people, but you can manage the environment by having those expectations. So I think when we say things like the school is 100% responsible, I think subconsciously you're taking away the responsibility of students and families to help in that process. Does that make sense? Because here's the thing. If I'm 100% responsible for your education, then that means I need more money to do that. Like, how many times have we taken, I know I steal from my house all the time and take it to the school to get a good, comfortable reading spot for children. I've literally taken furniture from my own kids and took it to work to create this environment. I've bought pencils, markers with my own money. So I'm feeling like if that is the philosophy, then teachers need like this extra budget, like this hazard pay for those extra responsibilities, like snacks. I've given kids food out of my own lunch bag. Like, that wasn't my responsibility, but if a kid is hungry, I'm not going to see a kid starving. So sure, go ahead, eat my food. You're fine. So I'm thinking, I disagree with that.
But I think so. To your point, we do all of these things. It's really not in the scope of our work to do.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't, it's not in the scope of our work to feed a child.
Right.
And there is not this, I mean, there is an alignment that if a child doesn't have food or if a child is hungry,
Mm-hmm.
then they can't learn. But in the big picture, right? So we're talking about like specific cases, situations, small cases, but in the big picture, it is the school's responsibility to educate the child while they're in the schoolhouse. If it's not the school's responsibility, then whose responsibility is it? The parents entrust the school to make sure their child is educated. If parents didn't entrust the school, we don't need schools.
I agree. I just think it's loaded. I don't think it's just that cut and dry. I think it's levels to that. I do believe it's the teacher's responsibility to prepare the lesson, to take the professional development, to do all the direct instruction processes to make sure that kids learn. But there's an ownership on a kid to also pay attention, to also show up. So that's the part of the family. So we can play tennis this morning with it. If the teacher's prepared to teach the lesson and no one shows up for the lesson to be heard, then whose responsibility is that?
I agree with you. I think so. It's twofold. The onus really becomes on the school, because the school then seeks out the student. And so that looks a variety of different ways.
Yep, agreed.
Contacting the home, to actually doing a home visit, to offering other avenues in which the student can be safe if they're not safe at home, providing other avenues in which we can ensure that the student is consistently in school. So I'm thinking about where it's a uniform school, I don't have my uniform. And so I, as the leader of the school, offer uniforms. I offer sanitary products to the family, just so that they are 100% comfortable for that child to come to the school. But it's this vicious cycle, because the truth of the matter is I'm doing it in two parts. One, I realize your child needs an education and I want them to be educated, but I'm also doing it because if that child is not in my school building, it affects my numbers.
It does.
And
it does.
That means that overall, the other impact of students fail. So for example, you figure, depending on where you are, but pretty much 2 to 3 about 5 students equals an average salary.
Yeah.
So that means you really need all 5 of those students in the seat with attendance, specifically like the first month of school, because you have to make sure that you get those coins.
Yeah.
You need those coins in order for the school to work.
Yeah.
So teachers don't have to buy extra paper and pencils, and they don't have to take furniture. And this is the deal. I didn't say this when you initially said it, but I thought about, there are so many schools with large budgets where teachers actually, don't have to buy their own supplies, but teachers don't take advantage of that.
And I'm wondering if we know that we even had access, because I'd sign me up for that school.
That school. We worked at a school that if you purchase things for students,
you're right.
You were reimbursed.
To an extent. To an extent. You had to get the generic. I couldn't buy the name brand fruit snack. I had to get the snack that said fruit.
Okay, well, let's leave that here. All right, so I can't speak to that because my memory, God has to help me with my memory. My memory is so vague, which is so bad, but we'll just
but here's something to your point about the numbers. And it's sad because the way the system is set up, it's just the way that the system is set up for us. We need you there because we need to be able to pay the people that are there, versus this community structure where everybody understands one hand is washing the other and we're all taking care of each other. Does that make sense? Because we've even heard students say, I pay your salary, I can get you fired. And so I think there's this underlying thing, this culture, it's negative, that students and families control the school and teachers, but students and families don't always show up in that control in a way that's always positive, if that makes sense. If the power really rests in the family, then as a family, as a community, then let's build up the school system. Let's pour into our teachers. I'm thinking about when I was living in Annapolis, and we had a really strong PTA in one of the elementary schools that my kids attended, and the kids needed Chromebooks. It wasn't in the budget for kids to get Chromebooks, like a cart. And so guess what? The PTA, we came together. We put our money in to get that Chromebook cart that a class needed. So I think there was power in that, instead of us as parents saying, well, the school should have it. Y'all are not doing your job. We realized the most important thing was our students who didn't have access to the technology that they needed in that moment. And everybody just pulled their money together. And we got a whole cart of like 40, I'm saying Chromebooks, but iPads or whatever. We just got a cart so everybody could learn and be a part of that process.
Yeah, one of the comments from online was that the statement is false because teachers have little impact on the whole child. Mm-hmm. Children come to school from all walks of life. Their little minds may not be emotionally, mentally, or even physically able to learn adequately due to what's going on at home, even if they have one.
Yeah.
And we talk about this in the urban community all the time, home. Yeah. And my issue with this is that, education is almost framed that if you're urban, you're Black, which is not true.
Correct.
And then if you're urban, you're below the poverty line, which means you're Title I and you can't afford it, which is not true. I'm thinking about PG County, which is one of the largest African-American counties in the United States, and also one of the wealthiest. And so, but we have all of these stigmas on education and what, those Black kids can afford based upon where they live. And although for many communities that is causation, but for many communities, it's not.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've just adopted the one size fits all philosophy in school, right? If it's urban, it has to be, like you said, colored, it has to be poor. And some of your best schools sit in the urban districts, New York City schools, DC public schools. I mean, some of the best I've seen have come out of these communities. So I think, again, it's about us changing the narrative and reframing what that means and what that looks like, right? Because poor doesn't always mean poor spirit. Poor could just refer to your pocketbook, right? It doesn't mean that you don't want what's best for your child, even if you can't necessarily afford it. So I think we have to start to shift that conversation around what urban education really looks like. I mean, urban refers to what? City, not poor, not underprivileged, even though that population of students shows up, they still are deserving of a quality education, no matter how they're showing up, and held to a standard. Not, I'm not gonna always say the same standard, but held to a standard. Because there's some conditions where everyone, like the one size fits all doesn't fit for a kid. Like here's an example. I remember having an issue with kids completing homework. And this was when I wasn't working, where we previously worked together. And I had to ask, like, well, what is it about the homework that you can't get it done? And it was something simple. When I go home from school, I got to take care of my siblings. Oh, bet, no problem. Do your homework here at school with me. So at lunch, guess what we were doing? The homework. So that no longer was a barrier. So I think it's just finding those ways to figure that stuff out so it doesn't have to be a thing. Because there's always going to be a struggle, Scott. Like there's always going to be something that people are getting over. And one of the things I think that gets looked over often, because we always talk about urban schools, we don't talk about the impact of Black children, Black and brown children in our suburban schools who are also struggling to just try to stay afloat or to keep up with the community that they go to school with. That population of children are struggling because they don't have advocates. In our urban districts, our students have plenty of advocates, but what is happening in our majority white schools where our Black children are there and trying to make it because their parents are making super sacrifices for them to be there? They have some of the same issues with social emotional learning. They have some of the same issues with drug addiction at home. They have some of the same issues of abuse, but we never really focus in on that community because we assume, oh, they have access to the resources. And that's actually not true.
Yeah, the interesting part is that I work with a group of women that very small number, less than 5, but they grew up in suburban communities where they were the minority at their school. And their school had less than a 10% population of African Americans. And the struggle that they talk about being a Black woman, learning their name. And when I say learning their name, embracing the meaning, being comfortable telling people it's their name, because in many cases, they have a stereotypical Black name. However, they wanted a name that resounded in the white community. And so they dealt with a lot of social emotional isms because they didn't feel like they actually fit in. The inferiority they've dealt with their hair, because their association of hair didn't look like what they saw every day, their friends they were hanging around. In some cases, weave now is the talk of the town, but at one point, when I was growing up, there was no weave. You could get braids, but actually, the hair flowing down your back, straight hair, that wasn't an option. And it's the emotional toll that even as grown women, many of them have even come through experiencing the HBCU experience, but they use the HBCU experience to kind of gain their identity as being an African American because they had such a very hard time coming through the K-12 system being the minority.
Agreed. Because look, that was like part of my story. I was from 4th to 8th grade, the only Black in my class. And then in high school, there were 6 of us, right? We're talking about out of a class of like 200. And we used to call ourselves Africa. We sat together, we ate together, and we was not with the mess, okay? It was 3 boys and 3 girls, and all of us from that class have gone on to do incredible things, but it was a struggle because now when you become the only, you are the representative for the entire race, right? Everything Black was like, ask one of them. And we're like, we don't live in the projects, we don't know. So, it's that piece, right, where, let's go back to the initial question. Was the school responsible for educating us? Yes, right. But there were other parts of that education that weren't there, that social, that emotional, that cultural relevancy. Now, to this day, I wouldn't dare send my kids to that school that I graduated from. I wouldn't dare because of the impact that has like still lingering on me. I think I need to get a therapist about that. I'll give you one story that still bothers me to this day. 40 years old, still remember a teacher calling me another student's name. And I don't want to say that student's name because I think she follows me on Facebook, but here's the thing. We didn't look alike. We didn't talk alike. We didn't act alike. But this teacher always called me her name. And I'll never forget that teacher saying, when I said, that's not my name, it's Christina. She says, well, all of y'all look alike anyway.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That would definitely bother me.
But this is, so just so you have some context on why I always got this inner Harriet Tubman ready to rise up against these folks, it's because of those experiences. And that was allowed. Of course, I shared that with my mom. My mom had a conversation, and then you can smooth it over with the passive aggressiveness. Oh, I meant you all wear uniforms. That's what I meant when I said you all look the same. You can play that role, but we know what she meant. Now, I should call her name out, the teacher's name, but I won't because we're professional at Take a Look. But I think there's just something to be said about kids in suburbia as well. We always focus only on children in the urban setting, but our Black and brown children across the globe are struggling with the educational system.
Yeah. And, initially, so I appreciate this conversation. I believe during this conversation, I've even changed my stance because I definitely believe that so much of the onus is on the school. I have to be more reflective about why I believe that, because I grew up in a system where the onus was not just on the school, the onus was on the entire community. So I'm thinking about being a part of Central Baptist Church and having issues in math classes, and a shout out to, Shardina Jones. So our church had educators. She knew that I was having problems in math. She taught at a different school, but she identified a tutor that would meet us at a neutral spot, which was our church. He tutored me. He was very old then, so I'm sure he's probably dead and gone, but he tutored me, and she was this like instrumental. There were times where she was even taking me to tutoring because she lived in my community. She didn't owe my parents that, and so I'm also thinking about the University of Pittsburgh had lots of programs that were connected to our high school. And I don't even know how much it was connected to the high school or if it was just because close proximity. So not that you're from Pittsburgh, but the University of Pittsburgh is in this area called Oakland. And so Shenley High School was also in Oakland. And so because they were in very close proximity, they did a lot of things together. And there were so many programs in which students would come and you could learn a variety of different things. You can have great summer experiences because the University of Pittsburgh had a multitude of these programs that were offered. I'm also thinking about the college tour. How I picked my HBCU was going on a Black college tour. And, I thought this was amazing. It was more than 300 students. We went from Pittsburgh all the way to Florida. Then we came back up through Tennessee. So 24 schools, 12 different states in 10 days. And this, I'm thinking about these monumental experiences that truly shaped how I view education, even though it wasn't in a schoolhouse. And I'm even thinking about like my best friend growing up, her mom. There were lots of principals at our church. Her mom was a principal, but her mom was a principal that was like hands-on. And she had a minivan, and she always had students in her minivan. And sometimes the students didn't necessarily smell good. And I would always like scratch my head, like, why does Mrs. Jordan have all of these students that are stinking up her van? And now it's going to be stinky for us to get in, because you're selfish, right? You don't understand why she got the stinky kids in her van, but knowing that she was embracing them. And it's so funny that the things I questioned, I became Mrs. Jordan. And
that's real.
Yeah, and understood that like you have to be able to push past all the things you see because educate you want to 100% ensure that they have a fighting chance.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, again, it's in like the framing. So I'm thinking of like the first day of school, where everyone is at their highest level of like enthusiasm and the energy is vibrating high. Here's a chance to get your partnerships with your families. Normally, schools, we basically say, oh, we'll take care of everything. We'll take care of that for you. We'll do that for you. And so we create that culture that we will do it versus let's do it together. And it's making me think, when you were talking, Scott, I thought about education is the only profession where the ownership is only on the teacher. When you think about physicians, yes, we trust them and their scientific knowledge to help us with diseases and preventative measures, but if a doctor comes to you and tells you, hey, you have diabetes, you need to do these things in order to get yourself together. If you don't do them, is it the doctor's fault when they've given you the prescription, they've given you the knowledge to take care of it? Now, I know it may not be the best connection between education, but when we're talking about this community effort, if a teacher tells a parent, listen, I noticed I did my diagnosis on your child and they are 5 grade levels behind, here is the prescription that's going to help them get caught up. And then as the parent, you take the prescription and you don't go and put it into practice, then who are we to blame? Are we still holding the school responsible if they've given you the prescription, not just told you what to do, but physically gave you the resources to do it and you don't do it? Does that still lie on the school?
No, it does not. And, I'm thinking about, when you are in a family and this is your career, you're also the expert for your family. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about, I have a very large family and the number of people that call me for advice, right? Mm-hmm. What bothers me is the number of people that don't accept my advice. Mm-hmm. And it bothers me because over the years, you can see that if they would have just taken the prescription, the outcome of their child would have been different. And I'm thinking about one of my cousins, her child, you could see, right? You could see in before kindergarten, that like he needed some support. Very charismatic, very charming, but you could see that he was delayed in learning. And I encouraged his parents to get him tested. And I could remember adamantly his father saying, like, you don't know my child. You live out of town. My child is not going to be special ed. And it's like all of these stigmas that come along with being a student of disabilities because you've experienced it through your lens of school. And so because you have this negative stereotype of experiences, you now refuse for your child to get the prescription because of what your lack of knowledge suggests. And now here it is 20 odd years later, right? I've watched him struggle through school. It all comes down to like, he didn't have what he needed. The services which he was entitled to, the services which he should have gotten, his family, his parents didn't believe because like he's charismatic, right? He's an athlete. And so because they didn't believe that he needed him as an adult, he's going to continue to suffer because they didn't give him what he needed in kindergarten.
So the consequence of I thought I was still muted. Can you hear me, Scott? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
The consequence of that is the impact that it has on all the upcoming teachers who now have to service a kid who, had they gotten the services, could have been ahead of the game and now they're behind. And so, like, again, the community, and I think Mr. Marsh said it, and some other folks on Facebook said, like, the community is responsible for helping the process along. If I give you the prescription and you don't take it, we're not responsible for that consequence because that's now on you because you do have the knowledge and you chose not to apply it.
Yeah, I wonder, and I actually have another, so it's just so funny. I have another situation right now where it's clear the child needs medicine. and when I say medicine, it's that they have this history of their mom was bipolar, their
Mhm.
father's bipolar, and which is nothing but an emotional imbalance, right? We have
Yeah.
all of these fancy words, but at the end of the day, it's an emotional imbalance. In many cases, it can be generational,
Mhm.
but it gives you, it makes you do things that you typically would not do. It gives you this energy that you typically would not have. But this is the deal, it's really a quick fix and it can be under control. Like
Mhm.
it's clearly something you can live with and be successful,
Mhm.
period. And I see that when my cousin takes her medicine, like she's phenomenal. When
Yeah.
she don't take her medicine, homegirl end up in jail. Like
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
extreme.
Yeah.
So her daughter is seeing these things. Her daughter needs help, but everyone's like, "Oh, she'll be fine."
Yeah.
And so it's this lack of, we're going to exhaust all of our resources,
Mhm.
and it's this, we many of us still have this disconnect between doctors and what is something that, African Americans would do. We don't take
Yes.
medicine, we
Yes.
don't see psychiatrists, we don't
Yes. Come on, preach.
counseling. And so
Yes,
we have all of these isms that prevent us from being successful, when the truth of the matter is that it's okay to get help,
it is.
especially if that help is going to help you long term down the line. And I'll say it can even be something as small as like, your child need braces. You could afford the braces, but you're like, oh, well, if my child wants braces, they'll get those braces when they get older. Well, if you can afford it now and it's something your child needs now, why wouldn't you give it to them?
And they got kids calling them all kinds of names in school, shark
It
teeth
just
and everything,
it
because
can
you don't want to
really
do it.
help their image. And then I can hear
Mhm.
a parent saying, well, like them having like the big buck teeth, like that helps them. It'll like get them more confident.
It
But
does not.
but this is how some people think, and that's the reason why in many cases they don't provide their children with the services they need, because they truly believe like, my child will be okay,
Yeah,
my
we
child's a fighter.
we need to definitely do a class on mindset. Let me tell you why. Last week, um, one of my good friends and I, we went roller
I have
skating.
that book right here.
Yeah, we went roller skating, and we didn't stay long because we old. And after an hour, we realized we didn't take our Bengay and our icy hot and grease our knees up. But let me tell you what happened. There was this little boy trying to skate, and when I say he fell hard, and he fell on his back and hit his head on the skating rink. The aunt, not the mother, the aunt was like, "You gonna be all right? Get up." I said, "Ma'am, he's stumbling to get up." She said, "He'll be all right. He just needs to get up and try it again." But you're the aunt, you're not even the mother. So you're making a decision about this kid, and he legitimately was hurt. But I think there's some brokenness in the community, and those ideologies are being passed on that are affecting us, making us believe that it's the school's responsibility to do all of the teaching. Someone said it early in the chat. Education starts at home. You are your child's first teacher. I'm scrolling through, so we need to do some mind work, because here's the deal, Scott. You and I get on here week after week and drop jewels and diamonds and knowledge about how to start school, how to prepare for school, how to be in school, how to lead a school, how to transform a school. But what we haven't transformed are people's mindsets before they can even do the work. So it doesn't even resonate when your mindset is stuck. So I think we really honestly need to start doing some work for the community around how they think and where do those thoughts stem. Because if you don't believe that, if you believe it is the school's responsibility solely to take care of your child, then everything we said today doesn't even matter. It just
I
doesn't matter.
I agree. I'm thinking the key to fulfilling your own potential
Mhm.
is, it takes many keys. So many people frame it as if it's just one key. But as you fulfill your potential increases, and at
Mhm.
different parts of your life, it takes a different key.
Yeah.
one of the things is that if you never get to the first step of understanding and unlocking your potential, you'll never see the fullness of truly of what you can become.
Correct.
And that truly starts with being at home, because it's parents that give the initial values of what does self-esteem look like? What does courage look like? What does confidence look like?
Absolutely.
And so those are the pillars, coupled with education, coupled with hard work. But those initial value pillars is truly what you need in order for you to begin to unlock the potential of what truly could be success.
Yeah, because I think, I'm sorry, I was going to just add this, Scott, before we go. I know we're over time. I think that that's such a great way to end and close us out, because once we mix all these different ideologies, philosophies into one school system that has one philosophy, we see why we're having so many disconnects, because you have all these people with their different viewpoints trying to make them fit under an ideology that they never even thought to be true in the beginning. And so I think, we got to start to shift the way we think about things in order to impact schools in a great way.
Yeah. And I'm also, you just said so much that made me think about the school may have an ideology of what they believe. And let's just say they believe with urgency to serve all students. But if everybody that serves in the school doesn't share that same belief, you automatically have an imbalance. And so I'm thinking about that. I've served in districts where that was the belief, but I've also worked with so many people and they did not believe that that should be the case for Black and brown children.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so part of the biggest issue was, do you believe in the same children that we service, although you work in the school?
Yeah. And I think, that's the hard work of the leader, being able to turn people away that don't fit the mission and the vision properly, because all of these pieces go back. I'm driving back to your initial question. It's the school's responsibility to take care of the education. But if the players on the board aren't aligned, then they really can't take care of the education of that child. And if the parents or the kids that are plugging into that energy don't believe in what the school is offering, then they can't get the education that the teacher is trying to give them. And if the leader has another vision about what they want the school to be and everyone's disconnected, then we understand why our schools are failing. We understand why teacher retention is what it is. We understand why, everything else we've talked about all this time exists, because there's no cohesion there. And that's something we can fix. That's something we can control.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to, especially, you have these large charter schools with boards. I'm thinking about the number of boards that don't financially support the school. And there should be this alignment about how much, if you serve on a board, how much do you give to the organization in which you serve? And I think that we really need to look at that. Or not we, but schools really need to evaluate that if those that are making the decisions don't truly serve, don't truly know the impact of those students, that there is a disconnect.
Agreed.
We are so way past time. And so thank you so much. That's because we had to give our DMX tribute. So just be mindful of us. But thank you so much for joining. Take a look. We appreciate everybody joining in. We hope that you have an amazing week, doing good, helping and serving the community in which you live in. We look forward to seeing you again, same time, next place, same time next week. Joining us again. Have a great Saturday and we'll see you soon. Yeah.